Welcome back to My Classic Car. This week we're guests at the British Car Festival presented by the British Car Union of Chicagoland. When it comes to music, comedy, and cars, Americans have always had a strong love affair with British imports like the Beatles, Monty Python, and Jaguars. Later in the show we'll show you some British imports of the four-wheel variety when we talk with owners here at the British Car Festival. But first, GM's legendary Harley Earl is the subject of this week's Classic Designers and Engineers feature.
The Harley Earl Show, coming to you in living color and historical black and white.
Harley Earl came from a coach building background out west, customizing or styling Cadillacs for a dealership out there. Was discovered by General Motors people and brought back to Detroit.
Harley used to design the cars that C.B. DeMille drove, and he'd watch C.B. DeMille directing a movie, and I think a little of that rubbed off on Harley because he was a little that way when he came back to the studios of GM.
What Harley did for the automobile industry, or Detroit, is that he turned it into automotive Hollywood. At that time, you really didn't have the mass public in this country appreciating automobiles for their appearance. Before that day, Harley Earl came to General Motors. Cars were primarily built as a means of transportation function.
When Harley Earl got started, there was no such thing as a styling department in the industry. Basically, the engineers that put the car together, sort of hit and miss, did the styling of the car. When he started GM Styling, he became the master of masters on picking the right sketch. You could have 15, 20 sketches on the wall, but Harley would pick the one that was right. It was really the best design. And that became his secret of success. What he had to do is he had to force the engineering envelope. They would come up with every reason in the world why the tread couldn't be widened, why you couldn't get them on the grease racks. The ones that they used for running trains later wouldn't match the track. Can you imagine such a reason? But they used reasons like that. Harley Earl himself was associated with many, many things. His beautiful fastback cars. At the time when a car was a box, to have a roofline that would go in one long slope all the way to the rear of the car was really dramatic. Glass, the unusual use of glass. General Motors did the first wraparound windshields and wrap over backlights.
They fought him tooth and nail the whole time. Individuals, engineers at General Motors, they were like, you can't do this. Plus, nobody's going to want to have a curved glass or a bent windshield on a car.
Of course, Earl is credited with the fin craze. 1948 Cadillac got these little bulges over their taillights, which were reminiscent of the twin boom tail on a P-38 Lightning fighter. So from there, what began as two little bulges on a Cadillac, by 1959 ended up as tall as a lighthouse on a DeSoto.
If you were going to gauge the importance of different people in the automobile styling, all of them would have to pale compared to Harley Earl.
That's all, folks.
Welcome back to My Classic Car and the British Car Festival here in Des Plaines, Illinois. This 10th annual festival is presented by the British Car Union, which is comprised of a dozen Chicago area British car clubs. You can expect to see everything from Aston Martins to Rolls Royces among the 700 cars on display here. And if you're not too familiar with British cars, keep in mind that many of America's great classics were inspired by these cars. Peter, tell me how the British Car Union got started.
Well, it started in 1985 with a gentleman by the name of Malin Hillard. And on our way back from a race, he ran by me the idea of getting a lot of the British car groups in the Chicago area together and forming a British Car Union and having a festival in the summer. We did the planning for our first show in '86, figuring that if we had about approximately 65 cars, it would be a success. And when we put our first show on after 350 cars. The police who were running security and traffic control begged us to stop letting cars in.
10 years later, how many cars do you have?
10 years later, well, at this event right now, we still have cars entering. We're over 750 cars, which I believe to be the largest British car event in North America.
And you've got a couple here. You've got this beautiful and fairly rare MG ND.
ND, it's a supercharged car. It was a trials car in England. I vintage race it, and on nice days I take it to and from work.
Jared, a 69 TVR Vixen, pretty unique car. Tell me a bit about it.
Yes, it is. Comes from Blackpool, England. It's manufactured, handmade by TVR Engineering.
And what does TVR stand for?
The fellow who originally made the TVRs in the late 40s, it was named Trevor Wilkinson. TVR comes from his first name. You drop the vowels out, you get TVR.
Well, Jamie, this is the kind of interview I'm going to love doing, sitting in a 54 XK120. Tell me about this car.
This is a 3.4 liter straight six. It's a double overhead cam. It has dual SU side draft carburetors. And this particular model happens to be what they call the M model, which means that it has a higher lift camshaft, higher compression engine, the dual exhaust system, and also the wire wheel.
Well, it's a stunning car, and you guys have, your father and you have done a fabulous job. Thanks so much for joining us,
Thank you
Jamie.
very much, Dennis.
As I mentioned earlier, the British have always had a strong influence on the development of American cars, particularly race cars. This is certainly the case for the Ford GT40. In the early 60s, when Henry Ford II wanted a race car to beat the Ferraris in world sports car competition, he turned to English engineers to build the first of the legendary GT40s.
The GT40s, in my opinion, are fantastic cars because of their history. They're the only American car that ever really did that well in international racing. They're beautiful to look at. It's a very emotional car. They're absolutely fantastic to drive. There's no rational reason. When you start collecting things, can you really explain why you do it? It's a love for the car. It's a love for the history. And I just fell in love with the cars in general.
So you got this one in '83.
This car in '83, I bought my first GT40 in 1980. This car in '83, it's an interesting story. The car was purchased with 3 others by some investors from the East Coast. They took the 4 cars, put them in crates, shipped them to Belgium, stacked them in a warehouse, and just left them there for 4 years, basically, until their advisor said, now it's time to get rid of them and go on to something else.
So you bought all 4?
I bought all 4, and that's the only way they would sell them. I had Ronnie Spain from Scotland come down. Ronnie is the guru.
authority.
He's the authority, the world's authority. This car was in primer, did not have a chassis plate, so the owners had no idea what it was. They knew it was a Mark II. They didn't know any of its history. When Ronnie Spain first saw it, he became very excited because this car had sort of disappeared off the face of the earth. Actually, the other 2 GT40s did too. And he had no idea where they were.
Well, this is the one that won the '66 Le Mans.
Yes. And when Ronnie first saw it, he sort of thought it was, but he didn't want to say that it was without further checking. There are certain things that he looked at, and it took him, I want to say, 4 or 5 months to be 100% certain.
So George, can you show me some of the unique features that helped you and Ronnie identify this as the '66 Le Mans winner?
Certainly. Some of the things we can't see, there's holes in various parts of the chassis for ducting. There's holes in the floor that were unique to each car. Several things that are quite visible would be the cooling slot here that was put in by hand on every car, and every car had a different slot.
Almost a signature, eh?
Absolutely. The other thing was the roll bar. These cars all had roll bars installed after Ken Miles was killed, and each roll bar, like the slots, were put in one by one, individually, so they were all different.
Now, the fuel setup in this car, the fuel tank setup, was kind of unique too.
The fuel tanks are actually in either side, right in this area, coming back to here. And initially they had fuel bladders. This is a 427 with a single carburetor. It puts out, or let's say in 1966, it put out 485 horsepower. It was a relatively low-key engine. They were built for reliability. They were built for power, but mainly reliability. To run 24 hours, you have to have an engine that will last, obviously. The engine is not that different from what you could buy in a Fairlane 500.
It's amazing. Now these are interesting too. These are actually luggage compartments, right?
The rules in that day dictated that the car had to be road legal. It had to have headlights, taillights, blinkers, had to have 2 seats, and it had to have room for luggage. And that is the only place really that you could put a luggage compartment.
And I bet it got kind of warm.
It must have gotten very warm, especially after 24 hours. The cockpit is actually quite spacious. You can see with the bubble, gives a little bit of extra room. What we had to do, because I'm 6'1", we had to do some modifications in the cockpit to make it roomy for me. One of the things that make a car win is that the driver is comfortable, and if he's comfortable, he can drive much better.
Well, George, we're sharing the track with some Indy Lights today, but they're going to knock off for lunch soon. Do you suppose we could take it out on the track for a couple hot laps?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. I've driven and ridden in a lot of cool cars over the years, but my dream has always been to ride in a genuine GT40. With George behind the wheel, the GT40 performed as if we were on a warm-up lap at Lamar Sebring. The car's interior is small by passenger car standards, but surprisingly comfortable, even when the G-forces have you pinned into your seat. When we returned to the pits, it was time for professional driver Mark Gillis to strap into the GT40. Mark was hired by a Japanese auto magazine to test and review this Ford racing legend. It didn't take him long to post short straightaway speeds in excess of 160 miles per hour. The combination of the sound of the roaring 427 and the thick, damp air of our overcast day made me wonder if we were actually in England instead of Wisconsin. But then again, when you get a chance to see a GT40 at speed, it doesn't matter if you're on the moon. After about 15 hot laps, Mark returned to the pits with a smile on his face and nothing but praise for the GT40. My thanks to George Stauffer for making one of my lifelong dreams a reality.